Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? Are we trumped out after the past week of events, or is it all just more fuel for that popcorn eating binge in front of the TV as we watched it unfold?
I remember 2016 so well, and I'm now looking forward to the presidential race of 2020. And let's, have a bit of a chat about the Democrats getting underway or not underway.
Yes, in a rather befuddled fashion. All right, well, before we get to that, we'll start with it was quite a big week, actually, for American politics because a number of things all happened in the same week. And we'll start with the impeachment vote and Trump's acquittal. I don't think this was anything that anyone was not expecting because it was kind of telegraphed out in advance. Obviously, it is a political process. It's not like as a criminal sort of a court of law type thing. But the thing that was interesting, I guess the positive aspect, the only thing I can see in terms of helping the Democrats make their case is that they tried to punch it through as quickly as possible. So now they've got a clear run afterwards of just 9 months of just hitting the election cycle thing. They can talk as much as they like about how Trump was wrong. He was in the wrong for doing it. They've got Republicans that are, being quoted as saying that he did something wrong, even though they didn't think it was worth removing him from office. There was that dramatic Mitt Romney speech where he, voted with his conscience. It was good to I actually thought it was good to actually see a variation on that side of the aisle, shall we say? And it was just kind of insane. And I don't know exactly where it goes to from here and what the implications are. I guess we're going to know over the next 9 months what political impact it has on either side of politics over in America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was interesting, as you say. I always thought it was pointless. And, to be honest, and this is just my personal opinion, but I kind of think that an American on the Ukrainian gas board should be investigated. And that's being apolitical. And, so I didn't actually think that there was much of a case. And we saw it wasn't the case. I don't really understand why Mitt Romney finally found his conscience. As Trump pointed out in his press conference, it's the only time he's ever decided to announce that he has one. So that really didn't make any sense to me unless there's just such bad blood personally between them. And I thought actually it was the first time that Trump hasn't been 100% on the attack in any of these talks. Was it when he gave that press conference post his acquittal? And I just wonder if mentally there's something going on there in the Trump brain. I don't know what you think about that, Ben.
Well, I think
he was hurt. He looked genuinely hurt.
Oh, well, I think that's pretty easy for him to telegraph out to the cameras if he so chooses. But I often wonder whether, I think we were talking about this before, that I wonder if being in that job for the 3 years has affected his sort of instinct, his political instinct in a way, for how to play to the camera, and whether he still has the instinct of knowing whether he's going to win or whether he's going to lose come November. I just wonder exactly if, even for him, if it's gotten out of control, that this has gone way beyond anything that he ever expected. And maybe he feels like he's committed himself down a path so far that's, I guess, outrageous, for lack of a better word, and maybe he thinks that he should only escalate. I mean, look at his reaction after the acquittal. I mean, going to the that national prayer breakfast and essentially claiming that he hates people that who pray for things when they know that they're wrong. Of all people, he's the one lecturing religious people about that. There was a lot of the vitriol that he started to spew against the Democrats afterwards, which they did point out that in like the previous impeachment with Bill Clinton, he actually apologized to the country for any of this actually ever happening in the first place. Trump, of course, famous for never apologizing for anything, was true to form, and just I think he said he apologized for putting that his family had to go through it or something, but he was not apologetic at all about how this whole thing kind of played out. And then there was like that sort of wacky State of the Union address, which again was for the cameras, to more popcorn eating material, where you just sit there and wondering if you're watching a presidential speech or an SNL skit, and particularly with Pelosi ripping the his speech up at the end of it, which to be honest, I did take a bit of pleasure in that, because I just kind of think if they're supposed to be more serious political sort of processes and events, and he's clearly not doing it seriously at all. And I just wonder if he's actually, I know people have questioned his mental faculties. That's not quite what I meant here. I wonder if his actual judgment for reading the play is actually still on song, and whether it might come back to bite him later in the year at the election.
Well, I reckon you're onto something there, because that was my point about him seeming as if he was hurt. We know that he spews vitriol and he's just visceral in his responses, but he's, up until this point, he's generally been dismissive. So he'll call someone a name, say they're a bad person, and then he moves on. But I noticed that he dwelled on these points, and he went deeper. Like, normally just gives a soundbite, and it can be nasty, or it can be cold, or, it can be, aimed at someone personally, but it's a soundbite and he moves on. But this, he seemed to linger on points, point the finger at people, and actually seemed to be giving quite a personal rather than just a sort of veneer. Yeah. And so it actually made him, to me, look vulnerable. So maybe there's something in that. Maybe he is wounded. Maybe he is wondering now, after 4 years, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
And maybe he's just sick of it. Like, maybe not. I mean, maybe he just took the opportunity.
Well, that's the part that I was wondering whether he had it all together. Being in that job might have twisted that calculus for him a little bit, because it's not a regular job after all.
It's not, and it's tough for anyone, whether you're Trump or anyone else. It's a really tough job. So politics aside, and he's, I don't know, how old is he now? Is he 76?
He's got to be mid-70s. I haven't checked, but yeah. I mean, it's got a great
workout routine.
Exactly.
Really got a great tan routine.
Yeah, that's right. Just one other thing that I wanted to touch on before we move on to the debacle of the democratic voting system as it played out this week, because there's an interesting tech angle to that as well. One thing I did want to just touch on is the Republicans themselves, and the fact that they're so, well, with Mitt Romney aside with that impassioned speech, that they're so lockstep in with him. And what I find fascinating is that I'm not imagining how you could get into a situation where you're so convinced and so fearful of a base of voters that you literally compromise every single thing that you claim that you're there for to support this. And the thing that and the thing is that it's not as if it's rock solid. Like if they had absolute confirmed data, that it was totally going that way, like 80% of the country was supporting Trump. He was going to get elected in a landslide, and all the data was saying that was what's going to happen. Maybe I could understand why they're so fearful. But he got elected with a very thin sliver of votes, and it would just take a minor pendulum swing in the other direction to toss him out. And that's the part that I've never understood about how they've approached this, unless I'm missing something.
Oh, well, I agree with you, but I think the answer is quite obvious. The Democrats have done themselves, and this is an external observer. Obviously, I'm not American. I've just watched, but the Democrats have done themselves no services, as we'll talk about in a minute. And I think I've often thought myself, well, what would I do if I was a Republican? And, I don't know what Mitt Romney was doing. At some level, I believe it's quite insincere what he's done, but at least he did it in a measured way. And I think that's why the Republicans are just clamming up. They're not actually supporting Trump. They're just sitting there quietly and letting the Democrats do the work for them, because the Democrats look like they're in disarray. They look hysterical most of the time. They're fighting each other. If the Republicans, they know either way, whatever happens, if Trump wins, they all are safe. The Republican Party is safe for another 4 years, and they know then his term's done. And as soon as he would get in again, then the jockeying would start happening for 4 years ahead. But
so your contention is that if the Democrats were really switched on and focused and really taking it to him, that they would break?
Well, because then the Republicans would be nervous. So while the Democrats are in disarray, the best thing to do is not go into disarray yourself, because then you will sink to their level. So it's the Democrats have been probably one of the most undisciplined political parties in terms of behaviour that I've ever seen. They've just been, to the outside world, it just looks like they've been screaming at Trump for 4 years. It's not a good look.
No, it's not. Although I would argue too that it's not a good look on the Republican side, because this thing will turn one way or another at some point, and it will reflect badly on them if it goes the other way at some point.
That's an interesting point. You might be right. I still am of the belief that whatever happens in the future, we saw it happen with Barack Obama, the second term, maybe year one of that something happens, but then after that, kind of, then it's all the Republicans having their next crack. And I reckon that there are already really strong groups that are hiding. No question they're hiding behind Trump, and no question that their quietness is a tacit acceptance of what Trump is doing. So I'm not suggesting for a second that what they're doing is right, but from a political purpose, it's the right thing to do. If the opposition are screaming and fighting themselves, let them put on a show.
Yep.
And then you do all your stabbing and moving quietly in the background.
Indeed.
After the election.
Well, speaking of shows, the Iowa Caucus was convened this week, and it turned out to be a bit of a debacle from and it handed a golden sort of tagline to Trump. They can't even organise an election for themselves to get a result.
But they spent, the whole lead up to Iowa screaming at each other, accusing each other of being liars, playing unfairly, pointing the finger at each other. And this is what I mean. Then they have a mishap like this and Trump can point the finger and everyone in the Republican Party can say, oh, that would never happen to us. And it's not a good look for the Democrats.
So the thing that underpinned it, though, which I thought was quite interesting and brings the tech angle in, was that they tried to introduce technology into the system. In other words, they created an app that was supposed to report the results in multiple ways. Apparently, this is the first. This is, if I read it right, they did it. This is the first time they'd done it this way, which was not just delegate count; it was raw votes and a couple of other metrics that this app was supposed to deliver straight away, but apparently they didn't do proper testing of the app. They didn't check it properly, so it didn't deliver anything. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days later, no one knew anything about what was going on, and they had to go back, I'm guessing, to good old-fashioned, paper ballot counting to figure out exactly what the hell was going on. And it just, again, it's just... How can you expect to hand power to these guys if they can't even organize their own internal sort of electoral process? And it's a kind of a fair question when you look at it, and they really have to get switched back on. But one other thing that I just actually wanted to focus on was just in a more general terms, it's the idea of not introducing technology into an election process. That maybe what should be done is just paper ballots, chuck it, write it with a pen or a pencil, chuck it in a box, and have a human visually count it. That maybe that is the only way, because technology, as great as it is, can be flawed, and given that it's such an important process, that maybe they should just stick to an analog way of doing it.
Look, we've all been there with electronic polling. I've seen it fail in so many, unimportant arenas, whether they're spot tests at uni or, people giving presentations or whatever. So they're always fraught. I would think that the reason they introduced this and they really wanted to push it was that by getting this data, because it had a whole lot of different metrics, that they were going to be able to use that really to analyse how the candidates were tracking in the general community. So they balls that up. They don't have that data. They look like they couldn't run a chook raffle, and they're fighting each other and just screaming a lot at the opposition. I don't know if any of them really have got a hope.
And that brings me to my last point, which is who we haven't touched on so far is Bloomberg and his imminent arrival, apparently on the Super Tuesday votes. That he looks like more than ever the serious candidate, because he can just swoop in with his hundreds of billions of dollars, his unlimited financial war chest that he's got, and can just trounce them all and say, hey, I'm coming in. I know how to do this. I've done it before. Leave it to me. I'm a real New York billionaire, and I can defeat the fake New York billionaire. And it's an easy message.
Well, I hope that's what he says. I hope he says it like that. And I hope he's got something to offer the people in the middle of America that are voting for Trump that don't like Trump. I mean, that's still the most amazing thing about Trump. He's got the highest approval rating, but he's also got the highest disapproval rating simultaneously ever in the history. And it turns out that a lot of people who actually vote for him don't even like him. So who knows? But I agree with you. I think if Bloomberg came in now, the Democrats have basically handed him the Democratic candidacy, because I just can't see how any of the others, maybe Pete Buttigieg,
Buttigieg or whatever his name is. I mean, I like it. I like him because, given the fact that he's still relatively young for this type of thing, and would be the youngest president if he got elected. He speaks really well, and I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's enough in this environment.
I think his age will stand against him. So another 4 years, another 8 years, maybe. But, I mean, he's the only guy that looks and sounds like a presidential candidate. The rest of them should just not only give up, but retire from politics.
All right, Steve. We might leave it there, and we'll no doubt check in on how things are going over the next 9 months.
I don't know what the US law is, but in Australia at 78, nobody has to give you a job anymore.
Oh, well, if they've got their faculties, I don't know, but we'll see what ends up happening. All right, so don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube, Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds. Watch us on any of your devices or listen to us on any of your devices, and hope you enjoy the website and all the content. We greatly appreciate your visit. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.